Just in kicking off, does anyone have any news or anything they want to share or make sure we cover in this webinar, like something on your mind that you'd like to make sure we cover in the session today? Just you might be on mute when you go to start talking, so jump off mute if you.
I've got one, Paul, related to the Up Complete Drive, which came up with a workshop with a client the other day. The taking need for harmony and making sure everyone's fitting in and how well they all look after each other and all that. The clash between that and when something's not, quote, on their radar, and they can see Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, like they don't tuck them in, they don't care what they feel. There's a particular person in one of my clients, and the other one, how could they be up complete? I said, well, look for where they are up complete. Who are they doing that for? And they go, oh, their team. But any peer's team doesn't count, kind of a thing. That's that. And I'm just thinking how it seems like it's contradictory to the drive, but I think it's related to the fact that they know what their eggs are and they look after their eggs, kind of thing. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Okay. Well, I think it's very similar to the comment Peter Kaiser raised last week about the truth for an authenticator. It's their version of the truth, or it's the truth that they see. And maybe harmony, it's like harmony in the world that they're focusing on, So if their world is their family or their particular team, or their own world, like I'm thinking of someone, a lot of athletes actually who are completers are seen as really selfish. I've had a lot of comments from their spouses over time that they're, make sure no one's on this call, it might be one of those people. But I've had comments over time that people can be quite selfish. And it's because when they're going for something like a world championship or trying to strive to make it to, the PGA level in golf or whatever it might be, that's their particular mission, then they get their routine, their world really organized around that in the belief that they're doing the right thing by their family to provide or, to strive for their career. And then once that's done, they can tick that box and do something else. And although it's harmony in their world, it can appear both selfish and, what's the word, disconnected from everyone else. And yet, to your point, Greg, it's the exact opposite of what they stand for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd echo that and own it as well. But I'd call the complete drive the rude drive, and I think in both directions because of that. What you're talking about for the use complete, but I think the avoid complete with the just it sort of bumps into people, and because it's off doing something random and things. It's just something I think I've seen and coined over the time.
Well, I think we can all be rude, but you're right, Richard. Like I think of even a classic example where you turn up to the door of someone in an office who's a completer, and they don't even look up at you. Or I know when people can visit, someone at home, and the completer's doing something, and someone walks in the door, and they don't even like say hello because they're so engrossed in what they're doing. They're not intentionally being rude, like they're not doing it to be rude. But they're so focused that the effect on the other person feels really rude.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I wasn't meaning it was intentional, but that's how it can come across. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Greg. Great question. Anyone else, anything that they want to share or ask? Judy.
I would also like to ask something about the complete drive. And just wondered if anybody had any suggestions about how, when the whole world is out of harmony, just about everything is out of harmony, are there any kind of strategies for keeping oneself more in harmony?
Sure.
You have a very puzzled look on your face, Paul.
Well, it's a big question, but you sort of invited the group to share, so I just stay back.
Anybody who has anything, because what's happening in my world is more people that I have been able to talk with are now getting very opinionated about politics. So my circle of people that I can have a harmonious conversation with seems to be getting smaller.
Okay, so this is a great. I might just sort of take this down not a different path, but before people comment, explain when we train people on the ID, we had a program called ID Mastery, and one of the techniques that we talk about in that program, and it was what I used to develop the ID, was what I called level 4 questioning. And that's to say that the question someone asks isn't really the question they mean to ask. It's normally just the beginning of a little journey you need to take them on to find out the real question. So I would suggest the question you are asking first up is not necessarily the real question. What you just asked is getting closer to the real question, which is more about you. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that selfishly. I mean that just as opposed to a bigger generalized question about how do you create harmony in the world. It's more like in your world, when for someone who needs harmony and everyone around me is maybe off balance compared to where they normally be, and I'm seeking conversations that are more harmonious, how might I make that happen? Is that more what you're asking?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So before we just go into that, I would just encourage people who want to help others and help them be more in stride, just be conscious that with this level 4 questioning technique, often if you just stay quiet before jumping, like particularly as a verifier, you want to jump to solve a problem, or an avoid complete wants to jump in and react, or an improviser's quick off the cuff with their idea, you know, and an authenticator wants to help. We can all be very quick to want to just react to the question. But if we just, Greg, the phrase you taught me years ago, which I've never forgotten, was stay dumber for longer, you know, and just stay a little more curious and ask a few more questions that are just down the same path. But, you know, but why is that important? Or what did you mean by that? Or, you know, something like that just delves a little more, and you'll uncover a deeper truth that's more what they're really looking for. So can I ask, maybe from another completer, if you can really empathize with what Judy's asking, and you've been able to have harmonious conversations and stay more in stride when the people around you are not as, you know, in harmony, what are some of the tips and tricks for how you've been able to do that?
Hi there, everybody.
Hey, Amanda, when you talk, could you hold your microphone up to your face a little bit? It's just a little.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that better?
I think so. Yeah.
Great question. I think, and I definitely feel that, but I guess the difference for us, for me, I feel like if I have harmony in my own life, in my day-to-day, I'm okay with that. And I think what plays for me is that I'm a high avoid improvise, so I don't really need to be in contact with people. I don't feel the need to be in conversations with people. So I feel okay as long as my own world is in harmony. So I don't have any great tips other than just find what works for you. And I feel like each day, if I look back and think of things I have to do every day, like going for a walk, and I've done that, I feel that doesn't matter what else is happening, I'm okay with myself. But to Greg's point before, yes, I feel like I can come across sometimes as insensitive of what other people is going through, because I'm focused on my own things, and as long as that's going okay. But then sometimes I'll see the news and I'm like, oh, look at everything that's going on in the world, and like I feel even guilty that I'm okay because I'm not really feeling affected by, you know, what's going on, and I see a lot of people struggling, and I'm like, well, my routine is going well, so, you know, I feel okay. But yeah, that's my tip, is just finding what works for you on your everyday, in just making sure you get that time to make sure there's harmony in your life every day. So that's what works for me.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, what I'm hearing you say mostly is if you, firstly, that, you know, you're not as maybe reliant or affected by other people given your one and improvise, but also, and I think this is really powerful, I was reflecting on this as I prepared for today, and just went through some of the notes from last week's discussion, that there's enormous power for a completer in getting settled. How you start your day has everything to do with how your day goes. And if you can get your little routine sorted, whatever that routine is, but everyone who's a completer seems to have one. And if you can do that, it's almost like you become invincible to anything else that happens around you. And whilst it might be desirable to have more harmonious conversations, it probably won't throw you as much if you've been able to get your day started the way you want to do it. But if you start in a more reactive or, frazzled way, it's as simple as not doing whatever your early morning routine is. It tends to make the day, or you're much more vulnerable to that, scattered, disorganized chaos that would otherwise, you'd otherwise handle quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Paul, I think it's Ian. I think I definitely echo that. I must admit, my routines, I find even if I've got to get up and do an earlier call, I still make sure I will get up even earlier to go and exercise, because that's a critical part of my day. So because I know if I don't do that, then I'm not set up for the day. And I think the other thing that I was also going to suggest as well is, and it is to Amanda's point, it does come across as selfish, but I felt I've shrunk my world somewhat in recent times, and I suppose to Judy's point as well, to a bit of self-preservation. I have something I've introduced I call cyber distancing. I actually just switch off all media because I find that has been really influencing my mood and particularly if you wake up to it in the morning and just get whatever terrible things happening in the world at the moment. So you don't. So you just shrink your world to all the positive things, and really just relate to the positive people, the people that are uplifting, the fun stuff. I've re-engaged much more with music recently, and audio books. So I've actually shrunk my world to keep my harmony while a lot of this is going on, and potentially to other people. I have to be conscious, and just I suppose something that I don't shrink it too far and sort of exclude family and friends, but because that's also a danger. You sort of put your headphones in and you tune out to everything going on around you. So be conscious of that. But I do have found that has been good for me and my keeping me in stride during these tough times. So hopefully that's of help.
Ian, you made an interesting comment. You said routines, early morning routines. So do you have different routines?
Yes. So today I have my webinar routine morning because we start earlier. So for me, I actually have a very different routine, which involves normally I drop my son, like part of the routine as I exercise, drop my son to work, get coffees from the local coffee shop, come home, so and it is very regimented. I can see you grinning there, Paul. Anathema to you, no doubt. But for me, it's essential. So what we now have is I've had to involve my avoid complete wife in the Thursday routine for us, where she has to drop my son, pick up the coffees. So while I'm sitting here preparing for the webinar, she's bringing the coffee down while I've set myself up. So I started early. I was up at 4:30 this morning instead of 5:30. So, but I still feel as good because I've done what I always do, because it's and I think anyone knows me that suddenly wants to throw a meeting in where I'm not prepared for it. You do it today for tomorrow, no problem. But you try and change it in the moment, that will throw me momentarily before I have to regroup and then restructure.
It's such a great example, Ian, because the people I find that are really successful, and I've said this previously, but it's not because they found the right niche for their knack, like the right role that magically just fits them. They just have such great self-awareness that they can reframe the day or reframe the situation so that they can then still be in control or be in stride with whatever their needs are. And what happens when you've got all this, either chaos or change around you is that your self-awareness, you know what to do to take care of yourself to then still be able to handle whatever the changes are. And that's the key. That's why people keep saying the key to success and also great leadership, the first ingredient always is self-awareness. I think you're hearing a great example of that there from Ian in that, the day might be different. So I've got a different routine for that. I don't let the day change my level of fulfillment or effectiveness. I change the way I approach it so that I'm still organized on top of it, even if it means either being a little bit early or adjusting my other day's routines.
Yeah, Paul, I got a similar sort of story, and I suppose to you guys, over recent weeks, I've done exactly what I said about being the rude drive, because I haven't even had my video on because of the run I go for in the morning, and I get up at 5:30 and it's a 9.5K run. I just get back at 7 o'clock. So there's no way I'm going to have my video on looking like a mess and sweaty and whatever. So this morning I had to do my short run, which now sort of aches me for the rest of the day because I haven't quite covered the distance, but I'm able to be here. So it's something that I didn't even realise the impact until I said it before, that because it does, when you're in a Zoom meeting and you haven't got your camera on, I find it distracting too. So my apologies now that I've thought about it.
I'll just give you one other perspective though, Richard, on that. So I appreciate everything you've said. So when I started, not so much Zoom calls, but back in the days of WebEx and, video calling and so on, I was, everyone would make sure they got all their, selves together to look good on camera. And because of my workout routine of a morning, there were calls that, to fit them in, I'd be like, okay, I can do it, but I'm going to be coming straight from the gym. And I'd just be sweaty and have my exercise cap on. And I mean, there's been many calls, I think a lot of people have seen me on, where I've just literally come straight from the gym. And I've had a lot of feedback over time that, firstly, I think as time's gone on, people are more relaxed about, and with working from home, a lot of people more relaxed around how people might appear on camera. But secondly, in the role that we play, I've had a lot of feedback that it's actually really inspiring for people to see that you still take care of yourself, whether it's a run or some form of exercise, and that you get that done first. So I've had no negative feedback on appearing that way. It's been more that it's been an inspiration or a lesson or a catalyst for others to maybe follow suit. So, I appreciate how you feel, but I'm just giving you the perspective from someone who might be on the receiving end, seeing you come back from a run and still get into the call. Just the example you're setting can be inspiring rather than how well you might look on camera.
All right, no, thanks. Hey, the other one I had, the strategy we suggest for use completes about an interrupted day is to plan for interruptions. And so when they come along, you say, oh yeah, no, I planned for that. And I'm wondering whether, to Judy's thing about the negative stuff going around the place, you plan for knowing that that's going to happen too. Because to Ian's point, you turn the media off, that's one thing. But because there's so much of it, we probably can't ignore it altogether. But when it comes up, so yeah, that's right. And I'm choosing not to buy into that, but I'm ready for it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. All right. Does anyone else have anything on their mind they wanted to ask or cover today? All right, so let's get into the start of what I would call the start of the day normally, which is our protocol around the peak performance indicator and the culture of the group. So let me quickly share that slide for you so you can see. There's not too much here that's let me just find it. That's new. Where are we? Similar culture to before, but I'll just pull it up for you. So just so you can see the culture is still one of diversity, meaning we've got, good representation of all drives, but there's a stronger dominance of verify and avoid improvise, which has been pretty consistent through the whole of our webinars. And I think it's more because if we were to sample the general population, particularly in business, the people that we have had do their IDs, this is a pretty strong pattern, I think, that we see come through. So that's what we've got on the team. My request to you is diversity works in a team, and it's the first ingredient we look for in high performance teams, so long as everybody plays. If you've got diversity, but, for example, the avoid improvisers don't share anything, then you miss out on their contribution. So even though it might feel uncomfortable, particularly in a group meeting like this, it's the avoid improvisers that would want to sit back and just absorb and listen, and you're learning heaps and you're really engaged and getting a lot of value from it. But I would just ask, can you also give, share? And it's a very safe environment. No one's criticized, everyone learns. And although it's a question it might feel some uncertainty about in terms of whether it's going to be a silly question or, you know, is it something everyone else is interested to talk about, please ask. And if it doesn't quite fit, or we'll turn it into something that's valuable, you know, but please share it, because we value what you bring to the table from the other side of the fence. If you're avoid improvise, but I'd say for every drive, you know, don't sit back. If you've got a question or a thought on your mind, it occurs to you because it's meant to be, you know, it's meant to be there and probably meant to be shared. It's one of the things I talk about when you're being instinctive. You know, these ideas or issues come into your head because they're meant to be there, and potentially in a setting like this, they're probably meant to be shared and helpful to everybody. Any questions or comments about the diversity before we move on? Okay, let's talk about being in stride. So we just had some conversation to do with, you know, a couple of directions of the ID, but I just want to take this moment to just get you to reflect on how you're doing this week. And, you know, as COVID continues and the year, we're now about to start September, which is almost spring here in Australia, which is a wonderful time of the year. You know, it's certainly got that fresh feel about it. Not good for those of us looking to extract a little bit more skiing time, but think about where you're at in terms of being in stride and whether or not you're showing up the way you want to be and that you're proud of. You know, that's why I think the way to think about it is the image you're casting, the effect you're having, both for your own life and for the people around you. Is this the best that you can be? And what might be in the way of that? So we talk about that by being on that green arrow there. That's you being in stride. On that scale of 0 to 10, 10 would be right on the middle of that line, really in stride. And, you know, a 0 or 1 would be way off to the left or to the right, where you're probably on medication or something like that, dealing with stress or the lack of sleep or whatever it might be, to deal blood pressure, you know, as opposed to dealing with what the root cause of the issue might be, which is how to get back in stride. And so my question to you is, on that scale of 0 to 10, what's your number? What's the number that comes up for you? And there's no right number that anyone should be, but there's a number for you today, whatever that number is. And I'm suggesting to you that whatever it is, if you want to be at your best, you'd ideally have that number coming up as an 8, 9, or 10. So, you know, David, when we started right at the start of this call, the way you were talking about being in stride and just the energy you're giving off, I'd be really surprised if your number wasn't an 8 or a 9, for example, because you just sounded so positive. But that doesn't mean that it would have to be, or that there isn't something else going on that might pull you out of stride. But I'd really be interested just to hear from you, actually, just to sort of share with the group, given that, and not that everyone heard your interaction at the start, but given that, you know, in the context of this peak performance indicator, what number would you say you are today? And maybe if you can just sort of talk to why that might be the case.
I'd say I was an 8 or a 9, but I'd say that I was an 8 or a 9 probably 360 days of the year. I think that it's an attitude, you know, that life happens. And for me, you know, every day is this amazing, you know, absolutely amazing challenge. I think I'm just somebody who's really grateful to actually be alive every day. I think when we look at humanity, and this is probably a bit more in-depth, Paul, than the answer you're looking for, but I think, you know, the very fact that we even exist as human beings is just a phenomenal scientific or mathematical fact or something. And I think not to be grateful every day is a real shame. I think for me, it's a shame. And, you know, I turn on a PowerPoint and I look at a PowerPoint and I just think how amazing it is that you can flick a switch and the lights come on, or you turn on a kettle, or you have a toaster, or the fact, you know, just so many things every single day to be grateful of. And again, you know, I live up in the Blue Mountains, like, you know, what isn't there to love? I'm looking out over the lake at the moment, and it's the reflections on the water and the sun rising and etc. So I think for me, it has a lot to do with focusing on all the absolutely amazing things that you have around you and actually being prepared to share those with other people.
Have you always been that way? Have you always been someone that's looked at life that way? Or did you was there a conscious turning point where you made that shift to, you know, and it was like a decision to live with that mindset?
That's a very good question. No, it was a decision. It was absolutely a decision many, many years ago. And it came through, I guess, some adversity. And you realize that you can actually make a choice as to how you interpret those things. Yeah, and so it was through adversity. But you know, I had I don't know, I could go on and on, but I think out of that adversity, you look at it and say, well, there's me, or you look at it and say, wow, isn't life an absolutely amazing thing? And I can make it whatever I want to make it to be. You know, as Greg was saying earlier, you look at my ID and you think, well, I look at my ID and I just think, what a wonderful life I've had.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's interesting listening to you that you said first up, it is a decision you made. I think a lot of people feel like those who live positively are lucky that they've been blessed with a positive mindset or being blessed with some sort of perspective on life. But the more I work with people that are, you know, living with that positivity, the more I find it is a decision that they've made. And so often it has been through a time of adversity. But you mentioned a word earlier that I find to be the key to happiness, and that's gratitude. And if you can just be grateful for everything and see everything that happens meant to have happened or it wouldn't have happened, and then look for the gold in that, I find that's really key. So particularly for improvisers who need that positive energy, and you not only need it around you, you need it within you. You need it coming from your own thoughts and feelings and the conversations you have with your own head. We've got our youngest member on the webinar. I can see Tanya's son there in the corner. Hey, buddy. It's good that he's interested. Welcome. But it's really important, and I just say to anyone else that might either be struggling with, you know, staying in stride, or you got people around you that need to be in stride, it is a decision. And even though a time of adversity, I was saying to a friend of my son's yesterday, wanted some coaching, and he was in a real rut, you know, and I said, well, it's a real rut, and it's negative because you see it that way today. But I've learned that, you know, a lot of people have heard my stories about you can't have a Sunday without a Friday. You know, the whole story of Easter, and other people would say you can't have gain without pain. Gain without pain. A lot of people who live in a more positive way today have had a time of adversity where out of that has blossomed something really positive. And but I think seeing life that way, and then when it happens, you don't see it as negative anymore. You see it as the beginning of a new Sunday, or a beginning of, you know, something positive about to happen, and being grateful for that process is really powerful to stay positive, no matter what your idea is. Okay, anyone else want to share what their number is? Thanks, David, by the way, that was really valuable sharing. Want to share their number, or want to comment about, you know, them being maybe not as in stride as they want to be, and want some help with that?
Yes, Paul, actually quite an interesting thing there. You know, what I find is this stride is also incremental. You know, when you're an adolescent and growing up feeling vulnerable, and just gaining experience, and it's the experience of, I think, dealing with stress. When I think of companies we started as a youngster, and gee, was you know, what I considered a stressful time 20 years ago. You just build up this onion skin of dealing with it, you know. And okay, age comes with a few aches and pains, but it also comes with a bit of experience, and they sort of offset each other. So you've got the odd health niggle, but you've got an experience bonus. And it's that bonus dealing with, you know, just dealing with adversity, or dealing with the outside world that's getting a bit rough and ready at the moment. But when I think about the evolution of just being able to deal with it, that's my 9 on the Richter scale.
Thanks, Doug. Good input. Thank you. Leonie, you asked a really interesting question in the chat about your daughter. And I saw Greg's comment, which I think is bang on. But I had another thought I wanted to just share with you in case it could help you. So those who, you can always, those others can jump in the chat, but it was about someone who's 6573, which is Leonie's daughter, struggling with like a sleep disorder. And I would just, in case this helps you, Leonie, I would just mention the word always. When someone's a completer, they often use the term always, or they say something is always, and it can make it really exaggerated. And I'm not at all wanting to distort what could be happening with your daughter, but I've had people say things like, I always get sick in August. And I'm like, yeah, of course you do, because that's the plan. I mean, if you always have it happen, then it's going to happen. So, or, you know, this always happens to me. And it doesn't always happen. It might have happened a few times, as it does to all of us. But when a completer sees something happen 2 or 3 times, I'll say it's always, which then puts a pattern in their mind that it's an absolute continuous thing. And so one of the ways you might be able to help her is to show her where it's not happening. You know, when I was working with kids that had learning difficulties, and the parents would say to me, oh, you know, little Mary or little Johnny's unable to concentrate in class, I'd say my first question always, I wouldn't even honor their question. I would just say, what do they concentrate on? And every single parent gave me a positive answer. Like everyone said, well, they're really good at concentrating on science, or when they're doing experiments outside rather than inside the classroom, or when they're working on their skateboard, they can do that for hours, or computer games, or they all gave me answers, even though the problem they came with was that they're not able to concentrate on things. So I'd just be careful of, you know, the dialogue that she might be framing in her own mind around always. And then if you can show her where it's not the case, and then unpack those situations, find, well, what's happening there, that might be able to provide an insight for what she could do to break the overall pattern, that might be valuable to her. I don't know whether that's helpful, but you know, the idea occurred to me, so I felt I should share it for you. Okay, so with that, let's move on to today's conversation, which is we're finishing off talking about the X factors in relationships, and we haven't quite finished on the complete drive. We talked a little bit last week about the use complete direction, but we're yet to talk about the avoid complete drive. And I know there's a few people on the call that are really looking forward to this discussion, and some of you are actually quite strong in this drive, like the avoid complete drive. So I think this could be really valuable. And then I'm putting together a chart like this, and I'll complete it today at the end of today's session, that covers all of the X factor components that we've all shared for the 4 different drives and the 8 directions. And then that will be posted out after, you know, at the end of today as well. You'll see that come up as well as the video. So you've got that as a little tool and resource to maybe remind you of the things to focus on that you bring to a relationship, and that really are the best contribution you can make. So I just thought I'd show you this to give you, for those of you who are new to ID, you know, this might just help you. I'll quickly just go through and give you a snapshot of the complete drive, and then we'll talk about what the really valuable components are for the avoid completers that you bring to the relationships, what you see for yourself, but also what other people really value about that drive. So the complete drive is all about, you've heard us talking earlier through the call about harmony. So when you are a completer, you know, it's this bigger picture. So this is the use complete side. You have this bigger picture in your mind, and it's whatever your world is, and all of the pieces have to fit together and stay in harmony. There's a lot of people who say as avoid completes, but I get things done. It's like, yeah, you get the thing done, but the complete person keeps everything done. You know, they keep all the plates spinning, not just the one that they're focused on. So the bigger picture is really the world and the drive of the completer. And the other piece I would call out is how energy works. Energy for a completer builds up over time. So it's like a momentum that you get on, and this, your productivity and even your engagement builds up over time. Whereas for an avoid completer, to now get into that side of the equation, your energy reduces rapidly over time. You know, for a lot of people, a scroll bar is too long on an email. They don't get past the subject line. They don't even open the email, depending on how intense that avoid complete drive is. They'll just say to somebody, I looked at it, but it was just too long. So just tell me about it, and tell me about it in like less than a minute. You know, what's the elevator pitch version? Because their energy just depletes really quickly, and it's not something they do because they're consciously bored with you. Their energy comes in spurts, you know, and they've only got as long as that spurt lasts, and then they're on to the next thing. So they're much more single-minded about what they're working on. Whatever's in front of them is what they work on. And that's why when, you know, I remember Alona, one of our consultants, said when she signs up to a video call and the call's going to dial her back, by the time the call dials and she's a 2 incomplete, by the time it dials her back, she's forgotten that it was the call that was coming. She thinks it's someone else calling her. And I mean, it's just, I mean, for those of us who are avoid complete, I think we can all relate to that. But the more intense you are in that drive, I was talking to someone in New Zealand yesterday who's a 1 incomplete and a 9 in improvise. And, you know, he would ask for things and then move on and not even remember that he's asked for them. So that's the world of the avoid completers. Hence their spontaneity, their flexibility, the need for variety, and why they do get bored so quickly. And all their energy is at the start of things, not at the continuation or the finishing of things. So with that, let's move on and talk about this X factor in the relationship. And I might ask, first of all, to the avoid complete people, what do you see that you bring that you really value and are proud of that you bring to a relationship? And then we might hear from other people, including avoid completes, you know, how does it land for you relating to when you think of other avoid completes, what is it that you really value? But it'd be great to hear that from some of our completers. I'm giving you guys advance notice, by the way, so that you can plan what you want to say when the time comes. But for the avoid completes, what would you say are your, you know, the real value contributors, the X factor you bring to a relationship? Or you're already bored with the question?
No, this is Patricia. So I was just thinking that it's, I tend to forget when we've had a fight. I forget about it like 15 minutes later because I'm on to the next thing.
So there's two things there. It's not just that you move on, it's that you forget.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so true for an avoid complete. They'll say, we're having this fight and we've got this distance. We haven't spoken to each other for the whole day or for 2 days, but I actually forget what the hell it was about. I just know
Exactly.
not talking.
Yep. So I think that's something good to bring to the table, that you forget it.
It exacerbates the problem for the completer. They're like, how could you forget? Now it's 5 days no talking. Yeah.
And we're like, what was it all about?
Yeah.
Paul, I just have one word: flexibility.
That's what you think you bring, Pam. That's what you value about one of the things you value about what you bring.
Yeah, the flexibility. Mm-hmm.
How does it work when both people in the relationship are as flexible? I think, aren't you both choosing complete? How does that work?
That's such an issue. We're both avoid completes, use improvise. Oh my gosh. So we plan vacations. This is true. We plan vacations. We have a flight and a rental car, and we fly to Europe. Like, we just want to have the freedom to choose whatever we want to do, when we want to do it, and how we want to do it.
Does it catch you out? Like, I'm wondering whether, you know, one of you goes and organizes something and the other one does exactly the same thing, or something where you both are spontaneous and quick and flexible, where it actually also gets in the way when two of them are like that, or does it work okay?
I think it worked. No, we don't really have that conflict as much as we probably don't stay with things long enough. We just sort of jump in and jump out. And so that's where I think probably if one of us was a use complete or an avoid improvise, it would be like, well, hang on, let's take a step back. And today is our 41st wedding anniversary. So in 41 years, we have learned to kind of look at each other and go, oh yeah, we're doing that thing, aren't we? Let's think about it. So we've got the hell yes, the hell no, and the maybe rule. And you're not allowed to do the hell yes until you've thought about it for a while.
Right.
And then
How
you
long's a while? 5
like at
minutes.
least 2 minutes.
Exactly. That's good, Pam. Anybody else? What else is on your mind that you bring to the table as an avoid completer in a relationship? Well, one of the things I would say is it doesn't matter if you don't have a recipe or a formula or instructions. You just have a crack. You know, it's that willingness to have a go at things, and yep, we'll figure it out. There's a confidence and a courage and a just a willingness to try without necessarily the training, the rules, the instruction, the guidance. You just have a go, and I think it keeps things moving forward. You don't tend to get in a rut. That's the comment that I would say people have commented to me about, for example, is things are always moving forward, and there's variety and excitement because we don't get in a rut. And I think a lot of it comes from just the willingness to keep going on. We don't have to have the answers in order to keep moving forward. We'll figure them out as we go. And that keeps there's a freshness that you bring from that.
I would agree, Paul. I'm a use complete, and sometimes avoid completes frustrate me, or like I just kind of like, what is going on? Like, or like want to put labels on it, right? And so I, starting the ID, what really I'm sticking to is the drive to get started, because with me being a use complete, I've noticed that in myself that it's hard for me to get going. So probably the avoid complete can look at me and make, why haven't you started? Like, what's going on? This is all great. Like, so I really hold on to the driven to get started for the avoid complete.
Thank you. That's good.
Hey, Paul, I just asked Vera what I bring, because I think all I do is bring chaos to her. But she just said that without a hitch straight away, one word: spontaneity.
Right.
And she says it reminds me that I don't have to be as rigid with certain things, I seem to be all her drives being a 4, 6, 8, 2 conspire to have it all regimented in her mind. She said, "You remind me it's okay to have fun."
Right. Oh, there you go. So it's interesting, Greg. Like we talk about level 4 questioning, it's the spontaneity leads to the fun. It sort of goes somewhere. It's the same when I talked about the courage to try without all the rules leads to a freshness in the relationship. I think it's good to think about what you do and what it leads to that's really valuable to the other person, because it's not just the spontaneity for the sake of spontaneity is not necessarily what someone else values. It's what the spontaneity brings for them, which in her case might be the fun. When someone else says it's the flexibility, it's the flexibility leads them not being in a rut, and keeps their mind stimulated. So it's always good to look at what's the consequence of what you bring. Okay, any other perspectives? What about from the completers now? What do you see? What is it you really value about the avoid completes? And when you share it, you might share what it is, and then why is it you value that? What does that lead to for you?
I think being nimble for me, Paul, and therefore in any situation, the curveballs that come in, there's a strategy to handle them. And,
okay.
and I think I admire that. And particularly, look, the work I've done with Greg over the years, and you sort of see some of the things that a particular workshop or something might take a direction. You go, whoa, I didn't think of that. But he's able to roll with that really well. So I see it with others. Look, I see it most with quite clearly, but others as well.
Well, that's a great example. So the nimbleness not only gives you confidence, but it keeps your stress under control. What would otherwise have been a really stressful situation for you, or you wouldn't have even gone there in the first place. Now you've got the confidence to go and venture into those situations that you wouldn't have done before, and do it with confidence because you've got someone alongside you like that.
Yeah, and I think a legacy of that too is for when you're in a situation on your own, is that how would he have handled it? Because it gives you sort of a basis on which to approach what curveballs come at you.
Right. That's really because see, complete is looking for a framework, you know, instructions, a way of doing it, and just having a little mechanism for you to sort of say, well, what would Greg have done in this situation, even though you don't know exactly. Just the fact you go there gives you somewhere to go as a little formula to use, like an instruction manual.
Yeah, I'll add in another one too, that I see the avoid complete, use the term of sort of like dodgem cars. They keep sort of bumping into each other. You know, it's fun to watch, but it can create some chaos.
Well, depends which car you're in.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Richard. Someone else was going to share something there before I could hear a voice someone wanted to share.
Yeah, Paul, it's Joe. Sorry, I haven't got my photo up because I'm actually still in bed. Anyway, so I was just asking my husband. He's a 6 in complete, and I'm a 2. And I said to him, "So what is it about me that brings value?" And he said, "It's not boring. It's about things always changing, flexibility, and he says he wakes up every morning going, 'Oh, thank goodness I'm still here.'" So yeah, it's basically just about that that flexibility and that spontaneity and fun.
Thanks, Joe. You know, the thing I would say is these things aren't necessarily new or may not sound that you know, that insightful, but I think it's very easy to undervalue them. You know, that you can take for granted that your spontaneity, as an avoid complete, your spontaneity, your flexibility, the fact that you'll just go and try things without having all the answers and way forward. It's not just a part of, you know, the way you operate. It actually is very life-giving to the other people around you, whether that, you know, is inspiring them or just getting them out of a rut or the reason that they value being with you. I mean, they're really important components to what you bring into relationships. And I'd say it's as true in a work relationship as it is in a home relationship as well, a personal relationship. You know, there are people on teams that will say, "I love working for that leader because," for example, as a 2 incomplete or an avoid complete person, we never know what's coming next. There's always something new coming. It's always stimulating and exciting here. And that fresh activity is, you know, really stimulating for them. So it's applicable to the work side as well as the personal side. But I think it's very easy to undervalue it on the personal side because it's not always something that's discussed and, you know, appreciated. It doesn't come out verbally as often, but just to have the confidence that not only is what you bring, but it's what other people really value in you. Anything else that anyone wants to share about the avoid complete drive?
The one last thing, Paul, this thing about we bring spontaneity and variety and joy and all that, we also bring chaos and confusion and bumping cars. And I think for me, I sometimes think, why are you mad at me now? You liked me 2 minutes ago. You know, like I just gave you this wonderful spontaneity. You're telling me to be quiet so you can think, you know. And I think the gift is, you got to remember that there's a talent and a vulnerability coming together with these drives, and that we have to check in regularly to see which impact am I having now, rather than presume, oh, that's me. I think it's a dynamic game that all of our drives are bringing in a vulnerability and a talent at the same time. And we need to check in with how it's being received if we're really going to be linking up, you know.
That's really good.
Nice plug there for you, son.
Thank you. Well, I think it's, you hear a lot of people in, you know, relationships where you've been around a long time, like 41 years, and, you know, they'll say communication is the key. And maybe that's the point. It's the constant checking in to make sure we're as aligned as we'd like to think we are, or that we know we need to be to have this really good relationship. So, you know, I think those constant check-ins, even in business now, they're doing away with performance reviews on a, you know, annual or biannual basis and saying we should have check-ins, and the check-ins are to really drive a level of alignment that's more frequent than just once every 6 months. So, you know, the same in a personal relationship, if that's where we really care with our significant other or with our children as well, constantly checking in, not just saying hi and what's going on in their world, but how are we doing? How are we communicating? You know, are we in a good place? And talking to that is, you know, valuable conversation. So guys, just in light of the time, I might just come back to what I started the meeting with, which is these webinars, both the frequency and the style and content of them. Does anyone have any suggestions or feedback as to, you know, what would you like to see in the future? We've still got one to go next week, which I'll talk about in a minute and what we're going to do. But beyond that, to keep them going, what are your thoughts around the frequency and the content and style that could make them more engaging? I'm fine for them to continue the way they are. I'm just conscious that there might be some fatigue factor that I'd want to preempt rather than just keep going the way we are. If there's a different way we could do it and do it better. David, I saw you give a thumbs up. What did you mean by that?
Paul, I like them the way they are. There's a regularity to it. Like I missed one session because I just had something else come up that I just couldn't get out of. But I did listen to it afterwards. But I like them the way they are. I like the regularity. I can book into it. And I think it keeps up, for me, it keeps up the momentum a bit. Otherwise you have a bit of a break and other things come up again. So personally, I like them just the way they are. And I think the general discussions, like even on avoid completes, and I'm fascinated to hear what other people think about things. And I think so they're talking about the format of it, rather than it just being clinical, that people are sharing their ideas, I think is really important, because I get something out of every single comment that people make.
Thanks, David. Awesome.
Oh, could you remove the screen sharing so we could see everybody while you're doing this? Great. So I'll just contribute that this works so beautifully for me every week. It is, I would say it's probably the most exciting call I have every week, because there's an energy here. There's an energy here of inquisitiveness, of curiosity, of really extremely valuable learning. We're learning about not just each other, we're learning about ourselves and about the world. And so that's my feedback. I wouldn't miss it.
Thanks, Judy. Well, you've been a wonderful participant and contributor through all of them, and your excitement, your energy has been great. And to be honest, I've learned a ton from you in what you've shared as well. So I'm glad that it's been valuable for you, but you've been very valuable to me personally, and I'm sure to many others on the calls too.
Thank you.
Paul, I like the fact that we have, well, when you do, something that's a focus. There's lovely free chat. We're going to do that anyway. But if we know it's about this and there's a theme where there's kind of a quote unquote agenda, we work from that we can move away from and come back to. So it doesn't just feel like, you know, we met at a bus stop or we're all just having a chat, which again, we're still going to have a great time. But I love the fact that we also quote unquote come to learn something and we theme around it, and it helps focus this wonderful, huge ID world down to a really nice essence, which of course, you know, really works for me.
Thanks, Greg.
Yes, I go with Judy. There's a sense of community here, which is quite unique, and I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Doug. All right, so there's a lot of you know, I guess the general theme is that you love them the way they are, but let's make sure there's always rich learning, partly from the dialogue that happens, but to Greg's point about having an actual intent and purpose to each session as well. So thank you for the comments, and I've read some of them in the chat as well, and are very supportive of the way they're going. There's been, Richard, you raised a comment about fives, and I know that I think that would be a really interesting and insightful learning. So next week, I want to talk about fives. And there's some new perspectives that will come out of that. There's someone that was on our team. It was just on 10 years ago. Some of you might know a lady called Layla Lance. And I'm tapping into Layla to bring her perspective, because she had a very interesting perspective on fives, which it was so insightful, I actually didn't understand it. Like, that's how weird it was, you know, like it was something really new. But I'm actually behind the scenes learning from her all about that to bring that into next week's meeting. I found it incredibly valuable. I want to learn it properly. So, and I'm sure some of you, based on what you were saying, Richard, too, there's different perspectives. So I think it will be really valuable to have that conversation, as well as the general conversation around helping each of us stay in stride as we continue along this this very interesting year's journey. But otherwise, we're right at the top of the hour, guys. So thank you for a really great dialogue today. It's always fun chatting to you. As I said, I've learned a ton. In fact, people have said to me in the last week, I should capture the things that I've learned. So one of the things I'm going to produce out of these are the new insights and learnings that I've found, and I'll put them into a YouTube video, and I'll post them and let you know when that goes up as well. But it's been these have been wonderful for me. So thank you for all the support. Have a great day or rest of week, and we'll see you hopefully again next week. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
See you, Paul.